If you have built applications with React-based frameworks like Next.js or Remix.js, you have most likely come across hydration errors. Over a year ago, I made a video on React hydration errors and I highlighted some causes of that error. But one thing I didn't talk about was browser extensions. In this video, I'm going to be explaining why browser extensions can also cause React hydration errors, and I'll also share one solution at the end of this video, although I want to make a separate video diving into the solutions. Before I move to browser extensions, let me just show you a simple example that can cause a hydration error. If you only care about the browser extension part, you can jump to the time currently on the screen. So I'm going to turn off this browser extension which is causing this error. So here in my code, I have a component called hydration error demo. Here I generate a random number, then I display that random number on this p tag, and then here I can use the hydration error demo component. Now if I should come here and refresh, I'm going to get an hydration error. This is because on the server, if we go to localhost here, you see that what comes from the server is random number 1, but what we have on the client is random number 9. That's because this random number which ran on the server generated 1, as you also see down here, but on the client it generated 9. Now a simple way to solve this is to just put a suppress hydration warning, then React is not going to worry about the mismatch for that element. But this is probably not what you're doing in your application. It's not like you have a random number or you have a date, because date too can also cause this error where a particular date in your server doesn't match the one on your client. It could just be browser extensions. Now why is this the case? Well, this is because some browser extensions can modify the DOM before React hydration occurs. When we get this from the client, we have some JavaScript that comes with our HTML. That JavaScript is run on the client, which runs hydration. But before hydration, some extensions can run, and those extensions can modify the DOM. Now when the extensions modify the DOM, it's going to modify what we have on the client, and then there is now a mismatch with what we have on the client versus what we have on the server, and that's why we have that hydration error again. Now I have this extension which I worked on I think a few months ago. I made a video about it. It's an extension that overwrites your page when you stay on Twitter or X after some time. Now I've modified this extension to look differently. So instead of watching for x.com, it watches for localhost 3000. I'm not going to dive into the code in this extension. You can check out that video. I'll also link it below. But basically there is a time limit and there is a time spent which is tracked and saved in storage. And once that time spent is greater than the time limit, the page will be overwritten with something else. So this is what the extension is supposed to do. It's supposed to overwrite the page with this, where you now have leave Twitter alone. But because this on the client has changed, it no longer matches what we get from the server. We're supposed to expect something like this from the server without the event listener, of course. When I refresh, you see we have that hydration error because what came from the server is different from what we have on the client at the time that React hydration was running. Now there are extensions that modify the DOM like this. For example, ad blocker extensions like adblock, password managers like LastPass, dark mode extensions, content script injectors like Grammarly. There are actually known cases online, and you've probably also experienced one of these where this particular extension causes this error for you. Well, the reason is basically that these extensions, they're overwriting the DOM and they run before the React hydration runs. Now, one way our lives will be easier is if these extensions made sure that they ran after all the script you have in your HTML has run. But some extensions actually do this on purpose where they run very early. For example, ad blocker extensions, because they want to block the ads you have on your page, then they try to run as early as possible so that those ads will not show. If they run very late, then those ads will show before the ad blocker kicks in and hides the ad. So you see, there is actually a good reason for these extensions running pretty early, but life will just be so much easier if they ran really late. But it's also not so easy for the extensions to run late. For example, when you're working with extensions, you have something called runtimes, which determines when an extension runs. The default is document idle, which runs immediately after the window onload event fires. There's document start. Scripts are injected after any files from CSS, but before any other DOM is constructed or any other script is run. Now, some ad blockers might actually use document start so that those extensions can run pretty early in the process. Then there is document end, which runs after the DOM is complete. Now, for my extension here, if I use document start, we're going to get that mismatch because it runs pretty early. But even if I use document end, or even if I come to this replace page and I listen to the load event, expecting that all my resources have already run before this extension kicks in, I still get that mismatch. So I'm going to refresh the extension here to reflect some of the changes I've made. If I run this, I still get that mismatch. So even a simple extension like this, I cannot ensure that it runs after everything. The only thing I can do is if I have like a set interval in the extension. So for example, when the window loads, I can now have a set timeout and then I run main. So let's just say it runs 1 second later. Now, obviously before 1 second, hydration has already run. So if I come here and refresh this, when I run this, it now works fine. After that 1 second, the extension kicks in and then this is overwritten to the don't do anything page. But depending on the kind of extension that you're building, you may not want that 1 second delay. You may want it to kick in immediately, but still after all the scripts have run. But different browsers have different ways they run, which can affect that process. Or maybe there is something I don't know. Please let me know in the comments. Now, obviously for you as a developer, what you can do is to disable the extension, and now you don't have that problem. You can work on your React to Next.js or Remix project. But what about your users? When your users are using your application, they are also going to run into hydration errors. Do you expect all of them to uninstall their Grammarly, their ad block, their dark mode extension, or whatever extension that changes the page? That is too much to ask of your users. So the question now becomes, how do you solve this for your project? Well, even if you don't solve this, your users are not going to see hydration errors. Let's check that. So if I go back here, I'm going to run the build version of this project. Then I can run nr start. nr is just an alias for npm run, and I refresh this. This is working fine. If I turn on my extension, or my extension kicks in 1 second later, I'm just going to comment this line. Now if I refresh, you can see that we don't get any hydration errors. The user can also not see any hydration errors in the console. So even if you don't fix this in development, your users are not going to be overwhelmed with the hydration error. However, it's still important that you fix errors like this, because hydration is happening for a reason, to hydrate the server rendered HTML. So if you come to a point where you feel like I don't care about the hydration errors, there might be some bugs in your application. There might be some mismatch in your application which you should care about, but you cannot see that in production. So you don't know about it until it becomes a big thing. But what is one way that you can solve it? I'm going to turn off the production version and go to the development version. But when it comes to solutions, there were so many solutions I saw online, some of which didn't even work for me. So I feel like I want to make a separate other video after I've made enough research about the solutions. For example, there is this long GitHub issue about the error. There are so many suggested solutions. Some of them didn't work for me. I'll share a link to these also. There is also this Reddit page where this person suggested that if you have suppress hydration warning on the HTML, it will solve the problem, but that didn't work for me. So if I come here, if I refresh, I have the hydration error. Now if I go to document.js and here I add suppress hydration warning and I refresh, it doesn't solve it. Some people said it didn't work for them on the HTML, but it worked on the body element. If I put suppress hydration warning there, it also doesn't work. The reason why I think this doesn't work is because even React doc says it that the suppress hydration warning only works one level deep. So I don't think you can put it on the body element to capture hydration errors that might occur in nested elements. But what is one way you can fix this? Well, another suggested way to fix this is to opt out of server rendering and go for client rendering. So what that looks like is in this index.js, before you render all of this, we can have a state. So by default, its client is false, and then we have our use effect, and use effect only runs on the client. So we know that when this use effect runs, we can set its client to true. Then here we can now say that if is client, return null. Sorry, not if it's client. If it is not client, then return null. So we know that this only runs when it's on the client. So now if I come back here and I refresh, this should hopefully fix it. Use effect is not defined. Okay, I should have my use effect here. Now we don't have any hydration errors because what our extension does is that it overwrites all of this to what we have here. So this way we don't have hydration error because this part of our code is only rendered when we are on the client. It is not server rendered. But doing this is also not the most optimal because server-side rendering has its benefits, and by doing this you're opting out of server-side rendering, which means you are losing certain benefits. Depending on the kind of application you are building, this may not be a problem, and for some other applications you are building where maybe things like SEO are important, doing something like this is not the best solution. Now, like I said again, there were so many solutions I saw online. I tried some of them, it didn't work, so that's why I'm not giving like a best solution here. But the main goal of this video was to help you understand why browser extensions can also cause hydration errors. Let me know what solutions you use for solving this kind of errors in your project in the comments below. I'll also make some research and hopefully make a separate other video where I now show actual good solutions for solving these errors in your project. See you in my next video. If you enjoyed this, please give it a like and subscribe. It does help the channel.